In case you couldn't guess by the fact that this video is nearly 2 hours long, this video will be spoiling the entirety of Honkai Impact 3rd. Honkai Impact 3rd is a game where genetically engineered combat lesbians fight the apocalypse, usually by hitting it in the face really, really hard. In this world, God is real and she sucks at Fortnite. Superpowers are primarily the result of eugenics and weaponized mental illness. Our main cast of heroes must push back the extinction of humanity in the face of radioactive monsters, government conspiracies, godlike beings known as the Herrschers, and freaking Kevin. In this hack-and-slash title, you assume the role of the various Valkyries of the mysterious organization only known as Schicksal. Some you unlock through gameplay, the rest by swiping your credit card. Whether you want to experience the deranged story, or dive into the near incomprehensible lore, or fight in dungeons, or explore the open world, this game has you covered. Honkai Impact 3rd is many things, but consistent isn't one of them. So join me as I explain what it's like to play this crazy game, so that you don't have to.
Tell us what to believe without any doubt, without any doubt. Never let us down. Tell us where to depart. For a promise true, for a promise true. This I can tell
The city is under attack, and apparently the best people to save it are 3 high school girls. The first is Kiana Kaslana, the main protagonist and a massive simp for Raiden. She just like me, for real. Speaking of Raiden May, her chest is always about to explode. That's not a euphemism. They actually implanted her with a bomb. Why? She's the 3rd Herrscher, and if she were ever to lose control of her powers, her heart will detonate. And 3rd is Bronya Zaychik, Master Assassin and Tech Wizard. Although previously paralyzed, she now has the ability to walk, run, and even hover thanks to a chip in her head and armored thigh highs. Even this early on in the game, Honkai 3rd sets itself apart in terms of sheer spectacle. The very first bit of gameplay takes place on the back of what I can only assume is a CFA-44 from Ace Combat. Except while in Ace Combat it's a one-of-a-kind super plane prototype, in Honkai 3rd, they're mass-produced drones. Kiana fights the hordes of Honkai beasts with only a little collateral damage, and chases after a crewless battleship that showed up out of nowhere. They just do that now, I guess. This part of the game really shows its age. Dialogue sequences and cutscenes are missing voice lines, subtitles occasionally have typos or errors, and the combat is a slog with the starter characters. Pretty much all of them are clunky and not very fun to play as. This is especially apparent as a new player when you do the weekly trial stage and get immediate whiplash from how much BS the newer characters can do. What the heck is even going on right now? When our protagonists make it to the control center of the battleship, Bronya prepares to hack in, only to find that the admin account has no password requirement and has a mysterious text file addressed to Kiana. You shall rule this world, but before that you will need to find 4 keys. P.S. The passcode to the bridge is your birthday. Let's just set aside the cybersecurity nightmare that is this method of gifting someone a battleship, because, you know, literally anyone with knowledge of Kiana's birthday could have hijacked the ship and done all kinds of damage. The internet exists and is as widespread as it is in real life in this setting too, so it's not unthinkable that Kiana's birthday is listed on a social media profile of hers somewhere. Before anyone has a chance to think too long about how odd the entire situation is, the chip in Bronya's brain malfunctions and activates an emergency combat mode. After a quick hard reset, all of the girls return home to the Valkyrie training school St. Freya. At the school, we are bombarded with a slew of new characters. First is Kiana's commanding officer and teacher, Himeko, my beloved. Next is Fuhua, she'll be important later. We also have Teresa Apocalypse, St. Freya's principal and Kiana's aunt. Finally, we meet Rita Roseweiss, a literal combat maid on loan from headquarters. What follows is a slice of life sequence where we see Kiana nearly flunk out because she doesn't study. In the nights leading up to final exams, Kiana has strange nightmares where a shadowy figure taunts her with details from her past. Her dad is MIA, Her mom was killed shortly after she was born, and her sleep paralysis demon claims there is even more that she doesn't know. I think the developers might be hinting at something here. Anyhow, Kiana barely passes exams and it's time for the next mission. The girls are off to New Zealand. A Honkai eruption there has knocked out all local Valkyries, and the Desire Gem has gone missing amidst the chaos. Given that the Desire Gem is one of the 4 keys mentioned by the letter they found on the free Battleship, recovering it is top priority. But what is the Desire Gem? Thanks to a handy-dandy info dump, we learned that when the second Herrscher died, her core split into 4 pieces. The Desire Gem is one of them. The other 2 were recovered by Schicksal, while the 4th was taken by Anti-Entropy, a branch of Schicksal that went rogue after the first Herrscher took over as leader. Searching the rubble, the girls find the Desire Gem. It's embedded in the leg of Wendy, a Valkyrie confined to a wheelchair. In order to stabilize the gem, Schicksal has essentially been using Wendy as a glorified lockbox. As a result, Wendy lost the ability to use her legs and has been crippled ever since. Are you sure Schicksal are the good guys? Understandably, Wendy McFrickin' loses it and transforms into the 4th Herrscher. The girls believe they can help Wendy come to her senses so she won't have to be killed. They almost succeeded, but then they get ganked by mechs. Remember Anti-Entropy? Yeah, they're here now, and not only did they one-shot Wendy, they also knock out Raiden and hijack Bronya. Cocolia, Bronya's mother, is in charge and she orders them to seize Wendy and May, leaving Kiana for dead. After falling back to St. Freya, Teresa and Himeko launch a mission to rescue Wendy and May, which starts fairly smoothly thanks to Bronya briefly breaking free and opening a back door for Kiana to infiltrate the Anti-Entropy compound. Kiana makes it in time to free May before anything could happen to her, but the same can't be said of Wendy. It's too late. Cocolia had strung them along by replaying pre-recorded video files of Wendy over comms. However, the gem has already been extracted from her, at the cost of Wendy's life. The gem now powers a massive combat mech, and its first targets are Kiana and May. Distraught, the girls take down the mech, and Bronya forcibly burns her biochip in an act of defiance. This has the unfortunate side effect of turning her brain into freshly microwaved ham, and despite St. Freya's best medical technology, she is now in critical condition. With Bronya's life on the line, Teresa opens up the vault under the school that seals away Schicksal's secrets in hopes that something there will save her. Running a search for anything related to biochips, the only unclassified file is related to the second Honkai eruption. As Teresa opens up that file, a snooping Kiana jumps in after her so the next part of the story can happen. Get holodecked, idiot. Rather than question what's going on, Kiana decides to roll with it, I guess. After some initial confusion, Kiana proceeds to experience the events leading up to the second Herrscher's death, who in reality was only stopped thanks to the sacrifice of Kiana's mother, Cecilia. In the simulation though, Kiana fights alongside her mother and defeats the second Herrscher, Siren, through the power of save scumming. She also gets hit on by her dad? Just as the day is won, the simulation is stopped by Fuhua. Kiana loses her crap only to get clocked upside the head and taken away to Schicksal HQ. So it looks like it's time for Subject K423. That was Kiana's real name. She was not the daughter of Cecilia, but a clone made to reawaken the second Herrscher. This smug bastard is Auto Apocalypse, Teresa's grandfather and overseer of Schicksal. And to him, Kiana is nothing more than a sick experiment, a glorified control mechanism for the Honkai itself. To put a stop to this, Raiden, Bronya, Himeko, and Teresa have teamed up with Anti-Entropy. I guess they decided to forgive the whole kidnapping Raiden and killing Wendy thing. Oh, and Bronya's okay now. To assist Teresa and Himeko, Anti-Entropy has sent their top scientists Einstein and Tesla, as well as 70% of their combat mechs. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was really confused at first when I saw Einstein because I was used to her Genshin version, Albedo. I personally think that this character works much better as a dude, but I suppose Einstein is from the era where they were copying the Fate franchise's homework, what with the whole make historical and mythological figures into waifu shtick. They even have a blonde female knight named after a sword. Also, Tesla is store brand Asuka from Evangelion. I'm not even joking. When Honkai 3rd had an official Evangelion crossover, Asuka was wearing Tesla's outfit. Thanks to some clever tactics and insider knowledge, the rescue team managed to... who am I kidding? They use brute force to breach the HQ defenses. Himeko and Tesla breach Sixel's airport, but then are beaten up by Fuhua and Rita throws them in jail. Meanwhile, Teresa, Bronya, and Raiden aren't doing too great either. It's at this point that you get a glimpse into the thoughts going through Raiden's head. Historians will say that she and Kiana were really good friends. Roommates, even. Oh hey, Kiana's awake from her nap. Kiana? Auto-Apocalypse's experiment was a success. The second Herrscher, Siren, is now reborn through the clone called Kiana. As she summons a new swarm of Honkai beasts, Anti-Entropy pulls out all the stops and charges in with a battalion of combat mechs. A small squad was enough to take out the fourth Herrscher without issue, and now there's dozens of them, backed by heavy artillery. In unison, they fire off a volley the Herrscher of the Void couldn't possibly withstand or evade, but she doesn't need to.
Hail my proud queen, on and on that waxen wing, show this head and flow. Sailor, sailor, chanting nevermore. Fear of fear, for the voice cracked.
This baptism of fire marked the coronation of the self-proclaimed Queen of Honkai, and makes for quite the prelude for what is sure to come if no one else can stop her. It certainly seems that way, because even with Raiden disabling her heart bomb and tapping fully into her suppressed third Herrscher powers, and Teresa Apocalypse using her secret divine key, the Oath of Judah, nothing seems effective in the face of the Void's overwhelming power. For a second, it seemed like Fuhua might have been the only one who could rise to the occasion, but there's just one small issue. Oto just used her gray matter to repaint the pavement. It would seem that all is lost. Himeko wakes up in a Shixel prison cell and has a vision of Fuhua of all people. Our stalwart class monitor informs Himeko that she's left the prison cell unlocked and given her a serum that should completely suppress Honkai within her system, and urges Himeko to flee while she still can. The serum, while it will remove Himeko's Valkyrie abilities, will allow her to live out a normal life as a civilian. Otherwise, she's living on borrowed time. Honkai might be what's giving her life, but it's also slowly killing her. Rather than running, however, Himeko fights her way out of Shixel detainment and links back up with Tesla, who then guides her to an upgraded battlesuit. Throughout the sequence, you can tell that Himeko is fatigued, but in spite of this, she fights on. I really appreciate that the developers actually take the time to have a quiet moment where we can really glimpse into Himeko's character and the mindset she has in this part of the story. All of this serves as the calm before the storm. Many times, Kiana and Himeko have sparred. Undoubtedly, they both share the memory of Himeko handing Kiana's butt to her when she first arrived at St. Freya. But now, the tables have turned. The power of Himeko's Godsbane battlesuit, the Vermilion Knight, still pales in comparison to that of the Herrscher of the Void. Even so, Himeko has an undeniable duty. Should a Shixel Valkyrie succumb to the Honkai in battle, she must be terminated, at all costs.
Himeko, 私は最強のバルキリーになるの。
顔を上げなさい。あんたは前に進むのよ。この不完全な物語、あんたの望む姿に変えなさい。生きなさい、キアナ。これで授業はおしまいよ。 Red roses burn my I've been called upon, never let you go. Is why I did them all for a chance at least to live in your way. Love of you is my most cherished thing, so stay alive bravely.
You're not allowed to die, okay? It's illegal. We cyberpunk now, boys! 4 months have passed since the incident, and one of the few remaining safe havens for humanity is Arc City. It's here that I realized that in my Tower of Fantasy video, I shouldn't have been comparing it to Genshin Impact. Instead, I should have been comparing it to Honkai Impact. 3 characters per team, special abilities that fire off when you swap characters, both games' stories revolve around space-time shenanigans. Tower of Fantasy even uses the same 4 damage types that Honkai does. I'd like to imagine that the TOF devs saw Arc City and wanted to make an open-world version of it. And yeah, I totally get it. Anyhow, both Shixel and Anti-Entropy are here because there's been a sighting of Kiana, and both want her on their side. Otto and Rita want her to continue the experiment, while Teresa and Raiden May just want her to come home to St. Freya, which has now officially split from Shixel and become a part of Anti-Entropy. In order to get more information on Kiana's whereabouts, Teresa and May have arranged a deal with the Grey Serpent, a powerful information broker with eyes all over the city and, gets killed by Rita before they can make the exchange. What is the dog doing? So Bronya spearheads Plan B, infiltrate the Grey Serpent's base, and get intel on Kiana from there. There's just one small issue. As it turns out, the Serpent never organized any of his files or collected data. He just like me, for real. Instead of a server farm, the Serpent put a quantum computer in a girl's head and has her search for any information he needs instead. Teresa and company try to ask the girl, named Ningyo, for anything she knows about Kiana, but unfortunately she needs authorization from the Grey Serpent to access the database. Right on cue, Rita shows up in a shiny new battlesuit. She anticipated all of this happening and ripped out all of Grey Serpent's cybernetics from his corpse so she could get admin privileges to Ningyo's quantum computer brain. She orders Ningyo to upload all her data to Shixel and then isekai herself after that.
You should kill yourself now!
Fortunately, the self-destruct sequence only turned out to be a data wipe, so she's fine. After fending off Rita and returning to the ship, Teresa and company get contacted by Grey Serpent. You see, he's less of a Grey Serpent and more of a Grey Hydra. Cut one down, and 2 will take his place. Anyhow, since they have Ningyo, he considers that a part of their trade for the intel they previously made, and starts hacking the Hyperion as payment. Ah yes, a state-of-the-art flying battleship is totally a fair price for a 240p security camera video. Thankfully, our resident hackerman Bronya kicks him out. We scarcely have time to breathe before Cocolia comes calling. Okay, so remember the business with the 4 gems and Kiana reawakening as Herrscher of the Void? Cocolia still has the Desire Gem. She's hanging onto it so Otto can't use it to reassemble Siren, but Shixel is now attacking her to try and get it, and she needs backup. But they don't exactly want to abandon tracking down Kiana, so...
Come on, gang. Let's split up.
Teresa, Bronya, and Einstein are going to head over to Cocolia's location to retrieve the gem, while Tesla and May will continue the hunt for Kiana. Now, technically in this part of the story, the game puts the goings-on in Arc City on hold while you follow what Bronya and her group gets up to, but in this case, I think it'd be better if we put off that for just a bit longer. The main reason for this is because we need to talk about the Grey Serpent is merely the servant of a larger organization known as the World Serpent, named after the title of its leader. Shixel currently has an alliance with them, and in Arc City the World Serpent rules supreme under the cover of Helios Life Sciences, a giant medical tech company that provides free Honkai infection treatment to the citizens of the city. Rita suspects that there's been something sinister lurking just beneath the surface, and she's been tasked with investigating just exactly what they're up to. Funnily enough, so is Raiden Mei, who is now sporting some Project Melody-looking drip. Everyone has their sights set on Kiana, who is on the lam ever since the incident at Shixel. However, as Honkai attacks resume once more, Kiana finds herself between a rock and a hard place. Fighting without Honkai energy is tantamount to suicide, but tapping back in runs the risk of letting the Herrscher of the Void take over again. Racked with survivor's guilt and on the brink of losing control, Kiana considers ending it all. But fortunately, the ghost of Fuhua helps her beat back Siren's grasp. Fuhua explains that before she died, she used the ultimate power of a class of weapon known as a divine key to bind her consciousness to those closest to her. We also see Kiana begin to internalize what Himeko taught her over the past few years at St. Freya, giving her the strength to fight on when all seems lost. Throughout the entire game, Kiana will occasionally echo one of Himeko's lines, and it's this influence that makes for some of the best character writing Hoyo has ever done. With Fuhua's guidance, Kiana is able to wrestle part of the Void's power away from Siren, and take on what is, in my opinion, her coolest form in the entire game. The Void Drifter is peak Kiana design, and you can't convince me otherwise. The visual symbolism, along with the slight edginess, is just mwah. She's also the first version of Kiana to have fun gameplay, with a unique melee attack that if you use too much, causes you to be stunned as Kiana has to fight off Siren for control. Anyways, where was I going with this? Oh right, the World Serpent! Yeah, so they're doing human experimentation and genetic manipulation, and also have been purposefully triggering the Honkai attacks across the city to force people to rely on their healthcare services. How delightfully dystopian! The next phase of their plan involves causing a massive explosion of Honkai energy right in the center of the city so that the survivors build up resistance to the Honkai. You know, at the cost of millions of lives, but for the World Serpent, it's a small price to pay for salvation. Do you think they might be the bad guys or something? Fortunately, Kiana manages to pull an Iron Giant at the last second and throw the Honkai reactor into low orbit before blowing it up.
Aurora Borealis!
Unfortunately, this knocks Kiana out cold, but before she becomes a terminal velocity pancake on the pavement, Shixel's top Valkyrie Durandal captures her. Sorry Raiden, better luck next time. Alright, now let's take a break and go on that detour I put off earlier. So Cocolia is holed up in an ancient underwater city left over from the previous era, which is a time period that's a whole other can of worms we'll get to later. Enkai no Miya, my beloved. No, actually, despite being abandoned and over tens of thousands of years old, the city is in remarkably good shape and completely functional. Most importantly, it's situated next to the Eye of the Deep, which in order to explain its significance, Einstein starts giving us our first Hoyoverse lore dump. I hope you're ready, because this will be on the exam. Okay, so canonically the Hoyoverse is a multiverse with branching timelines, yada yada yada. That'll be explored more in depth later. What's different is that the space outside of the branching timelines isn't empty nothingness. Instead, runoff from the real timelines falls into a dimension of pure chaos called the Sea of Quanta. The Quantum Sea is constantly forming and reforming itself, which can lead to short-lived bubble universes. The sea itself is a harsh and nearly unnavigable realm, and attempts to cross it have led to a number of issues in the past, such as Bronya's girlfriend pulling a Danny Phantom. Even getting there is an issue, which is why the Eye of the Deep is so important, because it can open a portal directly to the Sea of Quanta. Got all that? Okay, so to keep the desired gem out of Shixel's hands, Cocolia dropped the gem into the Quantum Sea. Your Honor, she pleads whoopsie daisies. Naturally, this only adds to the mountain of questions that Bronya has for her adoptive mother, but there's no time for them. Introducing Rosalia and Lilia, twin sisters who are also from Cocolia's orphanage. Did I mention she has one of those? It makes the recruiting process for her child soldiers easier. Yeah, anyhow, it's an unexpected reunion for Bronya, who grew up with them. The twins reveal that they're now fighting Honkai after Cocolia grafted Honkai Beast parts onto them so that they have augmented fighting abilities. Rosalia, Lilia, and Bronya all have a heartwarming reunion, which quickly turns depressing because they find a memorial for Seele, another girl from the orphanage who disappeared into the Quantum Sea due to an experiment gone wrong. Things go from bad to worse, however, once Einstein discovers that Cocolia is conspiring with the Grey Serpent. Before she can tell the others, though... Teresa and Bronya are caught off guard by the Eye of the Deep suddenly activating. The energy being released is attracting Honkai beasts from all over, and something terrible emerged from the portal to the Quantum Sea. Rosalia, Lilia, Teresa, and Bronya barely manage to fight off the monster, although it leaves Lilia severely injured. Bronya seizes the only opportunity she sees to retrieve the Desire Gem and dives headfirst into the Quantum Sea. Superposition. In quantum mechanics, this is the state of something that is undetermined. Every possible way something could turn out, all at once. The Sea of Quanta, then, is the cast-off possibilities from the real multiverse, and Bronya finds herself in the middle of one that is caught in a time loop. In this bubble world, Himeko is still alive, but she wields ice instead of flame. Seele is here too, and seems to be the only one aware of the time loop outside of Bronya. Together they free a young boy who turns out to be the cause of the time loop, and freeing him causes Bronya to get flung into a new bubble universe. The cycle continues with Bronya solving whatever problem the universe has and then getting flung into a new one each time. Sometimes Seele is there, other times she isn't. What's important though is that she's not a variant native to these bubble universe, but the one that disappeared from Kokolia's orphanage in the X-10 experiment all those years ago. The tides of the Quantum Sea are unforgiving, however, and soon the pair are separated once more. Rather than letting you use your account's unlocked characters, this section of the game instead gives you pre-made ones that you unlock and upgrade by progressing through this specific segment of the story. I have mixed feelings about this particular approach. On the one hand, you don't have to worry about being barred from progressing through the story because you haven't upgraded your characters or their gear enough. On the other hand, a lot of these characters just kinda suck to play as, and it makes it really hard to feel like you're actually progressing your overall account because you'll make it to the next segment and have to work with a new batch of trial characters that need upgrading all over again. This becomes the model for the entire rest of how the game handles story progression, and while they certainly make improvements later on, it still has a number of issues that I'll go into more depth with later. Bronya finds herself in a labyrinth of quantum shadows constructed by none other than the source of the first bubble universe's time loop, who is a young version of Welt Yang, the former Herrscher of Reason and leader of anti-entropy. A number of years ago, he and Einstein were trying to explore the Sea of Quanta, but inadvertently got stranded here. In order to safeguard his Herrscher core, he constructed a series of trials to ensure that anyone who would retrieve it is worthy. It's a long and arduous process fraught with the sea's shadow monsters, but a battered and bruised Bronya makes it through the core's defenses to claim it for herself. As Bronya approaches the core, a monster lurking in the depths moves to stop her. But it's times like these that we remember why we fight.
ブローニャお姉ちゃん
Bronya lays claim to the Herrscher core, and in doing so, she and her robot Project Bunny are reborn as the Herrscher of Reason.
All systems go. Right on. Right on.
Is this a magical girl transformation, or a mecha combination sequence? Yes. In my opinion, Bronya's Herrscher powers are the coolest amongst all those Herrschers, and no, it's not because she does ice damage. The Herrscher of Reason can materialize anything, with the caveat that they must understand how it works. This means that her power is essentially weaponized intelligence, and the only limit is her mind.
I will try hard to soar to the heaven I dream. There's no exception in this library, for I know I will always go with you. So my wings feel faster and to memory. I will try hard to soar to the heaven I dream. There's no exception in this
Meanwhile, Seele is having problems of her own. In order to finally escape the Sea of Quanta, she made a deal with the World Serpent, the shadowy figure behind the Grey Serpents. He needs her unique abilities to locate the Desire Gem so they can breach the barrier between the sea and the real world. What exactly is this special ability, you may ask? Dissociative Identity Disorder. Just kidding, it's something way more complicated than that. But for now, let's just leave it at there are actually two Seeles. A sweet cinnamon roll and a sadistic tsundere. Seele fights through a bubble universe that turns out to be an echo of the distant past. But I'm just gonna skip over the specifics of what happens here because it'll be covered way more in depth later. The important thing is that these illusions are specifically the World Serpent's past, the shadowy figure orchestrating from behind the scenes, the one who Teresa warned should never be let back into the real world, the one with immense power that puts even the Herrschers to shame. His name is Kevin. No, I'm serious, it's freaking Kevin. Thanks to Seele, Kevin has located the Desire Gem, which will allow him to re-emerge from the Sea of Quanta after being trapped there for 1500 years. Bronya arrives just in time to see Kevin take a hold of the gem, and she fights alongside Seele to try and prevent him from escaping. It doesn't work. Kevin would have taken the Herrscher of Reason's core too if it weren't for Wilt reconstructing himself to protect the core. With Kevin gone, the quantum shadows are closing in.
セーレごめんなさい。扉はもう開かないわ。もう助けられない。ブローニャお姉ちゃん行かない。セーレは行かない。もういいのよ。動いてよ。このあくびはまだ。ずっと私たちを守ってくれたお姉ちゃんを助けに行こう。ほんと仕方ないわね。行きましょう。一緒にお姉ちゃんを助けに。
Durandal has imprisoned Kiana at a Shixel facility at what I can only assume is Dubai once the oil money ran out. The city is completely abandoned aside from a handful of Shixel personnel, and Otto has been casually punching holes in the sky in an attempt to study the Honkai further. During one of these experiments, Kiana attempts to escape, but Durandal stops her. It's only when the World Serpent decides to drop in for a friendly chat that Kiana manages to give Durandal the slip, and even then it's only thanks to her fragment of Fuhua that she's able to escape Kevin. Oh, and it's also here that we learn that his last name is Kaslana. That's right, that means he's actually her great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Man's got a serious case of old man strength. Durandal and Kevin have a pretty sick showdown, only for Otto to interrupt it with his smug mug and propose a renewed alliance between Shixel and the World Serpent. Stupid smug ruining all the fun. Anyhow, Kiana managed to use her void powers to teleport away during the confusion, so we join her now at the ruins of another abandoned city. This time, Mei is hot on Kiana's heels as she is determined to make sure she doesn't run off this time. She only knows that Kiana is in this general area, and while searching, she stumbles across a young child named Sora who is under attack by Honkai beasts. Mei escorts her back to the cobbled-together shelter she and other children have been bunkering down in since the city was destroyed several years ago. Besides them, the city is basically abandoned, so how is this shelter able to exist? The answer doesn't take long to manifest herself. Raven, top mercenary of the World Serpent and one of the key players in the plot to irradiate Arc City, is the sole benefactor of this makeshift orphanage. She had clashed with Raiden before, but she's not here to settle the score from Arc City. The World Serpent is still pursuing Kiana, and they know it's only a matter of time before Siren completely takes over and the Herrscher of the Void repeats the incident at Schicksal. Sora manages to convince Raven to let Mei work with her to find Kiana rather than fighting against one another. Interestingly, the dragon that was under Siren's control during the Schicksal incident appears, and Raven extracts Kiana's whereabouts from it. Oh yeah, remember that part about them not fighting? That was a lie. After a quick duel, Raven backs off and Raiden is finally reunited with Kiana. It's heartwarming, but very bittersweet, especially since it couldn't last. Much has changed since the duo was last together. Kiana is no longer the carefree, happy-go-lucky girl she once was. Now she's racked with guilt and unsure of who she really is. Kiana is a name that belonged to someone else. In reality, she's just clone K423. But none of that matters to Mei. Nagazora, as it turns out, is where the two of them grew up, and during the first Honkai attacks, Kiana saved Mei's life when nobody else would. They reminisce about the past, but the elephant in the room is that if the Honkai corruption continues, Kiana only has a few months left at best. When revisiting the orphanage, however, Raiden Mei has yet another unexpected encounter, this time with Kevin. Unlike Raven, he has no quarrel with Mei, and he gives her quite the unusual proposal. Remember how Kiana's Herrscher core is broken up into 4 gems? Mei used to have one of them, the Gem of Conquest, which Siren took back during the incident. Kevin suggests that if Raiden were to retake it and become the 3rd Herrscher again, Kiana would lose enough Honkai energy to prevent her from full corruption. He's willing to teach Raiden how to do this, as well as how to fully master Herrscher powers, but only if she joins the World Serpent. Just then, the sky splits open once more, and another Honkai disaster has begun. Kiana's dragon, Benares, falls from the sky, and Kiana rushes to the crash site. However, instead of Kiana, Raiden instead only finds death and rebirth. Embracing the Honkai energy, she metamorphizes into the true Herrscher of Thunder. The dying Benares is reborn as Kunikara, and the two go on to close the rift and end the Honkai disaster at Nagazora. But this power came at a price.
I'm doing this to save the world, bro. But they're totally the bad guys, bro. You're my world, bro. Bro.
私に手を差し伸べてくれた。その手を掴んだ時から私の運命は変わった。あなたは私の人生の中で一番大事な人。もしあなたを助けることが罪なら、その罪は私が背負う。さようなら、キアナちゃん。
Oh right, in addition to some of Kiana's powers, Raiden took the dragon too. You know, standard lesbian breakup stuff. The next arc is short but kinda refreshing. Chekhov and the World Serpent run a joint operation to respond to the next Honkai outbreak. It's suspected that there is a new Herrscher in the area and they need to eliminate it before it can reach its full power. Despite being a city in the tropics, the newborn Herrscher is laying waste to everything by plunging it into a heavy blizzard. This is Mei's first assignment as a World Serpent agent, and she's teaming up with Rita and Durandal of all people. Gotta love how Chekhov's top 2 Valkyries decided that they should bring along ice powers to fight an enemy that's causing the equator to freeze over. The World Serpent didn't send Mei alone, however. Raven serves as the senior operator for the mission, and they're about to rendezvous with a third agent who is already in the AO. If you forgot that Raiden should by all means have a grudge against Rita and Durandal for how they treated Kiana in the past, don't worry, because the developers did too. They link up with Chen, the third agent I mentioned earlier, and they prepare to ambush the new Herrscher. Surprise! Chen backstabs them! It's revealed that the Herrscher of Ice used to be a Shixel Valkyrie before Honkai corrupted her and caused her to go berserk. Chen was saved by her a number of years ago and has been in love ever since, and he used the World Serpent as a way to try and get close to her, convinced that he could bring her back from the corruption. Wait a second, a canon straight ship in the combat lesbian game? It's more likely than you think. Chen was right too, he was able to bring Anna back, just not for long. In the few moments she remains lucid, she begs him for death, as the Honkai corruption has overtaken her completely with no hope of regaining control. It's a bitterly tragic scene, with this brief reunion about to be cut short by the rapidly approaching Raiden. As a part of his betrayal, Chen used the divine key known as the Scepter of Duat to temporarily disrupt Raiden's Herrscher powers. But unbeknownst to him, this has only made her stronger. You see, the Herrscher of Thunder does not simply have power over storms or electricity. Her full powers involve fine control over electromagnetism itself. The Scepter may have used a powerful EMP blast to disrupt the flow of Honkai energy to Mei, but now she can replicate the same pattern. And with that, the Herrscher of Ice falls. In his dying moments, Chen gives in to despair and anguish after seeing the love of his life turn into a monster and be felled by Raiden's blade. In that moment, yet another Herrscher is born, and he fuses with Anna to become the Herrscher of Rhymestar, a unique dual-core Herrscher that draws power from both Anna and Chen to become a force of nature through a twisted symbiosis. Mei takes it down too, but it does make for quite the spectacle. With that, Mei's first assignment as an agent of the World Serpent concludes, but it's not long before a new threat arises. The beginning of this arc is kicked off by a sick cutscene that shows the rebirth of Fuhua, only this time, she's out for revenge. The only problem is that, as far as I can tell, most of the stuff that happens in it isn't canon. This is the perfect time to explain why it can be so dang hard to get into the story for this game. You may have noticed that there are still a great number of things about the game's world and characters that haven't been explained very well. That's because Honkai 3rd has a companion manga that fills the gaps left behind by what is presented in-game. However, just because there's an official manga with an English translation doesn't mean that it fixes everything about the game's story. The official site for the manga is missing chapters. On top of that, the terminology for this game is not well translated from what I've seen. Now, I haven't dug too deep into just how badly the localization screwed things up, but to suffice to say, there's a fair bit that seems to have been lost in translation. On top of this, the later chapters of the game begin to have the opposite problem and begin over-explaining everything. I'm going to do my best to shield y'all from this once we get there, but whoever writes the dialogue really likes overly complicated info dumps about the specific mechanics of the story's multiverse that rarely make sense or actually explain anything important. To add insult to injury, the game's promotional materials and even some of the playable characters are peppered with instances of stuff that isn't canon to the main timeline. While this can be stuff that ultimately has little impact on the overall story, such as concept animations or a one-off variant of a character, This can also include an entire side story spanning multiple years told exclusively through time-limited events, centering around the player character. Speaking of the player character, you play as the captain of the Hyperion. Yes, that Hyperion. And in the menus and such, the various Valkyries dote on you almost like in a dating sim. The captain and his interactions with the Valkyries are largely not canon, except at the very end of the story where he is, and the aforementioned side story referred to by the fandom as the Captainverse. It was very strange for me learning about all of this, especially because apparently he is literally me. I swear to you I never played this game before starting my channel. What's even stranger is that, I guess that means that a grown-up version of Terry who is also a vampire who wields dual chainsaw swords is my wife? Anyhow, the point I'm trying to make is that the story for this game is very dense and gets needlessly complicated the longer it goes on. Anyhow, we return to the story where Kiana and Bronya are both on a quest to learn more about their Herrscher powers and investigating ways they can control them. Fuhua's consciousness has long since stopped being able to teach Kiana the fighting techniques that she used to escape Shixel and the World Serpent, so they're going to the mountains to see if there's anything Fuhua left behind. This is the ruins of her hometown, an ancient abode where Hua used to lead a martial arts school dedicated to fighting styles specialized in countering the Honkai. Strangely enough, they encounter someone who claims to be a disciple of Hua's martial arts school and a guardian of the mountain. While she doesn't know of any manuals or other training materials left behind by Hua, she does know that as the immortal Pheonix, she would occasionally shed a feather containing some of her memories. Kiana and Bronya subsequently stumble upon and then seek out these feathers, slowly learning about Hua's past in the process. Strap yourselves in, because this one's a doozy. 50,000 years ago, no I'm not joking, Fuhua was a relatively normal girl whose father led a martial arts school. However, he fell ill and sent her away to another city for education. One day, just before she was going to return home for vacation, the first Honkai disaster struck, wiping out her home city. With no place to go, Fuhua joined the Moths, a world organization that was formed to fight the Honkai. By the way, this period of time is called the Previous Era, and is when stuff like the Eye of the Deep was made. The Moths were the predecessors to the World Serpent, and there Fuhua fought side by side with Kevin against the Honkai, which was rapidly destroying mankind. It was through the Moths that Fuhua became the immortal Pheonix and gained an incredible ability to regenerate and even resurrect after death. This, however, wasn't enough to save humanity. As Seele saw in the Sea of Quanta, Kevin and Fuhua had other comrades named Yae and Rin Sakura. During a decisive incident at the final Moth base, Rin was overcome by the Herrscher of Corruption, a Herrscher that spreads like both a biological and a computer virus. Fuhua was able to stop it from spreading through people by using her divine key, but unfortunately it still managed to get into the computer system of the base and launch all of their nukes at the remaining 3 human cities. Even though Yae Sakura was a warrior strong enough to cut through space and time itself, she perished at the hands of the Herrscher of Corruption. What remained of the Moths entered cryosleep for thousands of years, so they could wait out the Honkai apocalypse and rebuild humanity at a later date. Time passed, and in a Shixel laboratory, Fuhua awoke to auto-apocalypse using Solium technology to repair her body. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, this is the ancient law she enacted when smashing his skull in. Unfortunately, it seems Otto isn't that easy to kill. He has dozens of clone bodies he can transfer himself to in the event one of them expires. Even so, the newly awakened Fuhua is satisfied with her revenge and then takes off for the World Serpent. She fights her way to Kevin, expressing that she's still disoriented after reviving, and was hoping that he would help her get her bearings. He gives her the feather that stood in his way when he attempted to capture Kiana. Kevin's remarks plant a seed of doubt in Fuhua's mind as to whether she really is who she says she is, given her differences in demeanor compared to the fragment left behind by her previous incarnation. So to settle this question, she takes off for her mountain home, where we rejoin Kiana and Bronya. Guess what? The lady who claimed to be the guardian of the mountain was Fuhua the whole time. The new one, that is. The entire hunt for the feathers was an elaborate goose chase to feed Kiana and Bronya just enough info about her past so that she could finally settle whether or not she truly is Fuhua. Unsurprisingly, Kiana and Bronya side with her previous incarnation. It's then revealed that the new Fuhua is, in fact, an entity born from the Honkai itself, using Fuhua's body as a vessel for its will. In a fit of anger, she tosses the old Fuhua and metamorphizes into her true form, the Herrscher of Sentience, aka one of the best characters in the entire game. The Herrscher of Sentience, who I'll be referring to as Senti-chan from here out, is probably the most expressive character Hoyoverse has ever made. She's one of the first playable characters to use full 3D for her face rather than animated decals, and they leveraged it in a way that shows off her bold and defiant personality. Frankly, given how much Hoyoverse likes to recycle elements of their characters in all their games, I'm surprised that literally no other characters use her crazed looks. In a way though, this just makes Senti-chan all that more endearing, because despite technically being a Fuhua variant, she is more than just angry Fuhua. The fight against her is a breathtaking spectacle, and really the entire arc is probably some of the best storytelling the entire game has to offer. It manages to balance copious amounts of backstory and world building while remaining focused on the characters and the conflict they're going through.
そもそもあなたたち敗者のくせに
委員長の
キアナ力を抑えて教えたことを思い出すの神なる者天下の極みなり万物に妙にして出るのし
廃墟研究神運こんな奴に負けてたまるか委員長敗者なんかじゃない
ありがとうキアナ律者は私に任せなさい元凶はもうすぐ解除されるもう帰って今回はおそらくさようなら
もういいまたなの犠牲の上での勝利だなんて私は嫌だ委員長返して
どうしてここに封印が破壊されたら
うるさいならもう一度倒せばいい私から逃げるなんて許さないから
With Senti-chan subdued, Fuhua decides to share her body until they can figure out a better arrangement. This means that there are now canonically 3 characters with superpowers derived from having multiple personalities living in the same body, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened thrice. With that matter settled then, the world is at peace. For about 5 minutes. We rejoin our heroes in Salt Lake City? So yeah, apparently Anti-Entropy is canonically headquartered there. Makes me wonder if they're building a ship called the Nauvoo. Anyway, things are peaceful at first. Bronya is training with Welt to better master the powers of the Herrscher of Reason. Seele is training too, so she doesn't have to be as reliant on her alter ego. Something that greatly troubles Dark Seele, because once she can take care of herself, what use will she be anymore? These doubts are only magnified as from the shadows, an insidious threat begins to chip away at Anti-Entropy's resources and attack the general public. Whether it's mechs at a parade suddenly opening fire on civilian onlookers, or strange sculptures coming to life as Honkai beasts, something isn't right. Often a strange puppet is left behind at the scene of the crime, and our protagonists eventually uncover the true culprit, the Herrscher of Domination. Unlike a typical Herrscher, however, this one isn't an individual. It's instead a gathering of thousands of weak puppets. These puppets are born whenever an individual gives in to despair. They reside in a pocket dimension known as the Theater of Domination, and their decentralized nature makes it so that killing one doesn't affect the Herrscher much, if at all. They are also capable of stealing other Herrscher powers, as Bronya found out the hard way. Raiden Mei, investigating things from the World Serpent's end, is able to use the Scepter of Duat's EM Pulse to prevent the Herrscher of Domination from stealing her powers. Despite their best efforts, Kiana, Fuhua, and Bronya are all trapped in the Theater of Domination with no way out. The Herrscher of Domination attempts to reawaken Siren within Kiana so they can steal the Herrscher of the Void's powers by taunting her with something they found within imaginary space, Himeko's core. While Himeko was officially designated as MIA, this is definitive proof that she's long dead. This leads to Kiana finally coming face to face with her inner demon. Kiana sees Siren's painful past and the suffering she endured at the hands of Otto Apocalypse's cruel experiments. Even so, Kiana cannot condone what Siren has done, nor what she wants to do. And so, they find that they can only agree on one thing, that there can only be one.
だが、お前の勝ちだ。お前の道を歩むといい。そうだろう。できるだけ最後まであがいてみせろ。キアナ。
Finally defeating the Herrscher of the Void, Kiana is treated to a vision of Himeko, and the two share a bittersweet moment where they reminisce on the past, and Kiana catches Himeko up on how her students have grown since she disappeared in imaginary space. With renewed resolve, Kiana rushes on to face the Herrscher of Domination. It's too late. Bronya and Fuhua have already fallen. Even while wielding Himeko's sword, Kiana is unable to destroy the puppets faster than they can dogpile on top of her, and everything seems lost. However, this doesn't mean that she lets herself fall into despair. Echoing the words of her mentor, Kiana begins her counterattack.
あんたの攻撃は終わり。
攻撃は終わり。それなら私の番だ。文句ある。
With hope burning brightly, the power of each of the 4 gems finally manifesting under her control, Kiana is reborn as the Herrscher of Flamesion.
美しくないのは当たり前。でも諦めちゃダメだって。世界はそんなにひどくないって教えてくれる人がいた。この剣は私たちをつないで真っ暗な空を燃やし尽くし、光をより彼方へ届ける。これが私とみんなの帰り道だから。
Wave goodbye to the past when over there at a time. For me again to soar above this world, to remove it away, still the void and brightness of the sun,
The former students and faculty of St. Freya gather to have a funeral for Himeko. Character moments like these are tender, bittersweet, and where the writing for this game really shines. Meanwhile, Raiden comes before Kevin with a troubling question. How could the so-called God of Honkai allow something as simple as an EM pulse disrupt its control over even Herrscher powers? Surely, if it is some kind of existence beyond mortal comprehension, one wouldn't be able to wrest its own power away from it. To answer these and other questions, Kevin brings Raiden to a hidden chamber in the World Serpent headquarters, and the hunt for the truth begins. Now technically this comes after the next major story arc, but I'm going to present it now because it's easier to follow that way. Miss Pink Elf here is Elysia, one of the 13 flame chasers of the Moths. which you might remember is the predecessor to the World Serpent. Fortunately, we've already met a few of the other flame chasers: Kevin, Fuhua, and Yae Sakura. Elysia explains to Mei that this place, known as the Elysian Realm, is a virtual reconstruction of the Flame Chaser's main meeting place and houses simulated copies of each Flame Chaser. Their job is to teach those the World Serpent deems worthy about the secrets of the previous era and what they know about the Honkai and humanity's fight against it. What makes this story arc a bit janky is that it's told across two separate game modes. First in the Elysian Realm game mode, and then it concludes back in the main story mode. This means that in order to get the context needed for that chapter of the main story, you basically have to sidetrack yourself, which can be a bit jarring. There are other issues to this approach that I'll discuss in a moment, but first let's start with the basics of how this mode plays out and the things that they get right before dissecting what it gets wrong. For those of you who have played Honkai Star Rail, the Elysian Realm will be familiar to you, because it's the game mode that the simulated universe is based off of. It's a roguelike series of battles that revolve around gaining buffs that last for the rest of the run, and each run gives you permanent upgrades for the overall game mode. While you're doing this, you gradually progress through the mode's main story, which slowly reveals the origins of each Flame Chaser. The thing that this mode really nails is the investigative nature of the storytelling. It makes it clear from the beginning that you're here to hunt down the information that makes up the world building and backstory. Whether it's using materials to unlock the next one-on-one conversation with a Flame Chaser, or just listening to the optional conversations during the main story, the game directly incentivizes interaction with every scrap you can get your hands on. It really doesn't get much more obvious than getting premium currency for reading the text logs. This is the kind of thing that was missing from the Lofo arc in Honkai Star Rail. If you're going to scatter the main story throughout the game, you better make it clear that the player is expected to piece it all together themselves. That having been said, this part of the story is not without its problems. The first and most glaring of which is that Raiden Mei just doesn't have voice acting for half of it. The first few times it happened, I thought it was a one-off bug, but nope. Halfway through the Elysian Realm and throughout most of the following main story chapter, Raiden Mei falls silent and then regains her voice for literally no discernible reason. The next major issue with the main story of the Elysian Realm is how it's paced. You'll get a story segment, then it'll force you to run at least 5 stages of the non-story mode in order to unlock the next segment. This may not sound bad at first, but if you're trying to get this done in a short period of time, it really starts to drag quickly. This is exacerbated by some key flaws that they solved in Star Rail's Sim universe. You see, in the Sim universe, you can use any character you have unlocked on your account, which makes sense and is consistent with basically any other part of the game. However, in the Elysian Realm, you only play as one of your characters at a time, instead of a full team like in any other game mode. And once a week you get a key that unlocks one of your other eligible Valkyries for use in the realm. This means you have to pick your first character very carefully, because you're going to be playing them a lot until you have a chance to unlock the rest of your characters. Why? Because screw you, that's why. The other 2 slots are instead filled out by support Valkyries, which are basically just 2 special abilities you can fire off and then they go on cooldown. While your characters do get extra buffs in the realm to make up for the fact that they aren't in a full team, this sometimes completely alters how they play and you have to completely relearn how their playstyle works. To top this all off, the difficulty scaling in this mode is just plain atrocious compared to Sim Universe. In Star Rail, as long as you have a fully invested team and the right buffs, you can easily clear the highest difficulty and get the maximum rewards each week. Each difficulty level feels like an appropriate step up from the last, and generally rewards you for picking the buffs that are best for your team. Meanwhile, the difficulty scaling in the Elysian Realm is a complete joke. 1.5 times difficulty can be basically done in your sleep if you have a newer Valkyrie, but the next step up, 1.75 times, requires so much extra DPS that it's basically impossible without meta gear. It doesn't matter if you get the best buffs available that synergize with your setup perfectly, you'll just fail the DPS check and get less rewards than if you fully cleared the previous difficulty. All this means you'll quickly get into a slog where you're forced to play the realm in order to progress the story, but you're only able to run the same thing over and over again for little to no additional rewards. You can't even mess around with trying out your other characters because of the stupid mechanic that forces you to re-unlock them for use in the realm. I get that originally this was supposed to be experienced over the course of a few months, but if Hoyo really wants people to get caught up on the story, these time gates have to go. At least the story itself is pretty decent. New flame chasers are gradually introduced in a way that keeps up the pace without overwhelming you with too many new ones all at once. You'll meet Eden, the previous era's equivalent of Taylor Swift. Artefelis is the realm's resident shopkeep. Cosma is a conflicted young man who serves as an elder brother figure to Griseo, an innocent painter who begins to unintentionally mimic those she spends time with. Sue is a man who can see all future timelines and is one of the premier scientific minds of the Moths, alongside Dr. Mobius, a cunning individual who carried out the highly volatile mantis surgery on all Moth soldiers who would receive it. Kalpis here is literally just local man too angry to die. Bronya probably has the most confusing powers of the lot, as she can see others' fates, and then bind them to it with a curse that is a blessing in disguise. Finally, the ever-enigmatic Vilivi is the primary engineer of the group, and chef. And, well, almost anything, to be honest. What's her secret? Dissociative identity disorder.
My life has been so much better ever since I traded my imposter syndrome to brilliant conman syndrome. Do I deserve anything in life? Heck no. Well, I grasp it anyway. Heck yes. I am a horrid goblin, but watch me make these people like me. Am I qualified to do this task? Well, I sure have the certificates that say I am. And how did I get those? Who knows? Not me. I am brilliant, fast, and absolutely drunk with power.
Through your investigation into the realm, you uncover these characters' secrets and tragic ends. You hear of humanity's desperate fight against the Honkai and the ever-increasing cruelty they would subject the Mantises to in order to obtain any kind of power they could use to fight the impending end of the world. These surgeries involve grafting Honkai beast DNA and organs to the test subject in a grueling process that either killed them or granted them their unique abilities. It's why Elysia has her elf ears, Cosma has horns, Aponia her butterfly wings, and so on. For Kevin, rather than giving him beastly features, it instead made him radiate insane cold, to the point where being near him for too long could give you frostbite. This is pretty tragic because that means he can no longer physically be with his girlfriend, who also happens to be the top scientist of the Moths named Dr. May. Raiden also likes to make a note of how the sim copies of Fuhua and Kevin differ from their living counterparts. Interestingly enough, Yae Sakura's copy was made before the incident with the Herrscher of Corruption, and everyone has elected to remain silent on what transpired afterwards. One of the most poignant tales is of Eden. After the nukes dropped on the last remaining human cities, she knew that the previous era was over. Rather than enter cryosleep with those who would wait out the apocalypse, she instead chose to wander out into the nuclear wasteland, singing the tune she embodied as if to disappear with the last echoes of the era she belonged to. The other contingency plan of the Moths, Project Ark, was to launch a ship containing the means to reboot human civilization on some faraway world. It could only support a single occupant, which was originally meant to be Cosma. However, in an act of self-sacrifice, he instead gave his seat to Griseo. Unfortunately, contact with the Ark was lost shortly after it was launched. Finally reaching the end of the realm, May is allowed into its deepest depths, Elysia Everlasting. It's modeled after the paradise that is Elysia's namesake, and even run by a cute miniature version of Elysia. As a reward for making it past all of the realm's trials, Elysia gives her access to a special typewriter that only prints the truth. What is Elysia's favorite food? Drop Table Project Stigma. Elysia takes this opportunity to continue sharing her most important memories, such as the shocking revelation that the 13 Flame Chasers were never an official unit within the Moths. That wasn't for lack of trying, but Elysia's proposal was denied, for fear of their group becoming too powerful. This is Elysia's final regret. Despite all of her wishes, the Flame Chasers never fought side by side. With the atmosphere growing heavy, Elysia begins to unravel her final secret. She's the 13th Herrscher. While this isn't a big deal to May, given that she's a Herrscher as well, in the previous era all of the Herrschers were staunch enemies of humanity. It was unthinkable that there could ever be one that wasn't hostile, let alone one that was cheerful and outgoing as Elysia. Off in the distance, an island covered in mist contains her final fate, something that the sim version of herself isn't fully sure of. The day is coming to an end, so she promises to May that, come the next morning, they'll go to that island and discover what happened to the real Elysia together. Meanwhile, we shift our perspective briefly to Yae Sakura, who has secretly commissioned Vilivi to reforge a divine key into a sword. She's been haunted by nightmares of a girl crying, filled with hatred, and she knows exactly where to find out what it all means. It's late in the night, and the moon is shining brightly in the office where the typewriter is kept. However, it seems someone was waiting for Yae, and that's when it all goes wrong. The next morning starts as peacefully as the one before it, but Elysia is strangely absent. Sue informs Raiden that Elysia is in trouble, while Mobius is more blunt with what that truly means. In order to verify this, Raiden and Kevin go to the Typewriter of Truth to investigate, only to find that the room is filled with papers that all read the same thing. Elysia is dead. Kevin senses traces of Yae's signature attack that freezes time and space itself. However, murder in the Elysian realm should be impossible. Should a Flame Chaser sim ever encounter an issue, they should automatically be restored from backup. Something is very, very wrong. Raiden goes to exit the realm and return to reality to see if she can see the problem from the outside, only to be redirected to right where she started. Only now, there are countless papers streaming from the typewriter's office, and all of them inform Raiden that Kevin is dead too. The next sequence is a whodunit murder mystery to try and track down who could have killed a sim, especially considering Kevin's raw combat power and Elysia being on relatively good terms with all of the Flame Chasers. Without Elysia acting as the glue to keep them together, they inevitably begin fighting each other, with plenty of blame to go around. However, as they all try to investigate these mysterious disappearances, they too vanish, one by one. In truth, there was no traitor amidst the Flame Chasers. And with each new victim, the realm grows more hostile. There's only one thing that could have so easily corrupted the data that has been painstakingly preserved for 50 millennia. The Herrscher of Corruption. While not the same one that ultimately defeated the moths and humanity in the previous era, this era's Herrscher of Corruption still has the same ability to spread, replicate, and subjugate those it infects. And in the realm, her first victim was Elysia. Sakura knew that she couldn't fight the corruption head-on, and so her space-time freezing slash was her attempt at escaping the attack that night. With their enemy finally out in the open, there's only one way the corruption can be purged from the realm for good. The Kevin Killer Mark 666. Okay, so I didn't get a chance to explain this earlier, but over the past 50 millennia, Vilivi was continually trying to invent something that could kill Kevin, who is the strongest Flame Chaser in terms of combat power. Why? For the lols. The only thing that she could come up with that would actually succeed, however, was the Mark 666. Basically opening up the command terminal and entering the command sudo rmrf no preserve root. She never wound up using it because, well, while it would delete Kevin, it would also delete the entire realm too, herself included. There's just one problem with the Mark 666. It requires Elysia to fire. That's why the corruption attacked Elysia first, because it identified her as the only thing that could challenge its power. Their last hope then rests with a secret that Eden shares with Raiden. 4 crystal flowers that act as keys left behind by Elysia. In reality, they were given to a select few of the Flame Chasers who participated in the final moments of the real Elysia. But in the realm, they just might be enough to reconstruct Elysia's sim so they can fire off the Mark 666. And so, for the first time, the Flame Chasers unite and fight as one. You witness each of them make a heroic last stand against the Herrscher that represents their undoing in the previous era, and the one that could easily do the same to the current era. Even the cowardly Pardofelis, the weakest of them all, risked everything so that Elysia could live again once more, and what a relief it was to see her again. Crossing over to the island covered in fog, Elysia uncovers the final truth. While she was a Herrscher, she wasn't the 13th. There never was a 13th. She was the first, and was one from birth. However, through some incredible twist of fate, she did not have the hatred of humanity that others of her era would have. She instead would have the exact opposite, an unconditional, universal love for all of humanity. She never stopped seeing the beauty of the world around her, and never stopped searching for the paradise she named herself after. She treated all with kindness and cheer, and even went out of her way to bless those who took advantage of her. And in the end, she sacrificed herself for a plan that would allow the Herrschers of the next era to break free from the influence of the Honkai and bring hope to all of humanity. After Raiden helps Elysia reenact her last banquet and final dance, Elysia gives her one last mission before she sends Raiden safely back to reality and eliminates the Herrscher of corruption for good. To remember the lessons and the legacy of the Flame Chasers, and to carry that wisdom with her until the very end. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but the best Christian allegory I've ever seen in anime-adjacent media was certainly not one of them. And with that, we now turn to one of the best cutscenes in the entire game. This entire sequence is just so creative. Manipulation of data is represented by the video getting rewound. When Elysia loses an eye, the aspect ratio collapses down to be more narrow. Everything is set up to evoke a retro anime aesthetic, and it leverages this to great effect. It also serves as an immensely cathartic end to the character arcs of all of the Flame Chasers. I still get goosebumps watching this. My gripes with the pacing and structure of this story arc aside, the actual writing here is just absolute peak. Which is to say, it's all downhill from here. Auto-Apocalypse is back on his bullshit again, and this time he's randomly announced that he's retiring and Teresa is to be made the next overseer of Shixel. All of the main cast immediately identify this as extremely sus, but they don't exactly have any objections to Teresa being made the head of Shixel, so they decide to go along with it for the moment. The succession ceremony is to be held in Koloston, a small village on the border of who knows where and nobody cares. This is the first time in the main story that, rather than taking place in a series of linear stages, instead takes place in the open world, which is to say, it takes place in a tiny map that barely qualifies for the title of open world. I'd even say that Honkai Star Rail is more of an open world game than this. Even so, there is some pretty neat attention to detail. If you play as Senti-chan, when sprinting she'll hop on her sword like a skateboard and hover around on it. If you play as the Herrscher of Reason Bronya, Project Bunny will transform into her motorcycle form and it'll actually handle like a proper vehicle. Which is hilarious given that Tower of Fantasy didn't even get this right with the vast majority of their vehicle mounts. While this isn't the first open world map in Honkai Impact 3 by a long shot, it's the first time that it's been incorporated into the main story rather than being a dedicated side mode. It also has a bunch of gimmicks that only apply to this map and don't carry over to the following chapters of the game. This is a huge annoyance I have with the later chapters of Honkai 3's story. They'll introduce a map for a chapter, force you to interact with a bunch of gimmicks that only apply to that map that you just know they're not going to stick with the moment the next chapter drops. It contributes to that feeling of not really progressing your overall account all that much that I got from that earlier chapters, which is a really sucky problem to have come back. These chapters of the game are also prone to dialogue sequences that are basically the writer's barely disguised info dump, which really only complicate the plot with world building mechanics that don't really contribute to the overall narrative. If anything, they detract from it because it makes everything really confusing for no good reason. Which is why, from here on out, I'll be heavily paraphrasing. Trust me, you're not going to be missing out on much. Anyhow, the main cast quickly uncover that Otto's plan is to go back 500 years into the past to change it. How does he plan on doing this given that direct time travel is impossible? Simple. If he can't change the past directly, simply delete the past and redo it. Obviously, this is insane, but for Otto, this is just another Tuesday. Kevin is actually cool with this plan because in his mind, this means that humanity gets another 500 years to try and figure out how to fight the Honkai. And apparently, the will of Honkai is cool with it too for some reason. But why would Otto do this? It's a girl. It's always a girl. Men will literally create a world-dominating, hyper-advanced organization that conducts highly unethical human experiments and then burn the past 500 years of history rather than go to therapy. So yeah, 500 years ago, Otto Apocalypse fell in love with Kaslana, who's basically this universe's equivalent of Joan of Arc. However, due to political bullcrap, she got executed, and he's been trying to find a way to get her back ever since. Teresa Apocalypse was a part of a series of Callan clones trying to resurrect her, funnily enough. Oh, also, remember how Kiana is actually a clone? Well, Durandal is the original Kiana, but when she and her dad raided Chixel to break K4233 free, there was an accident and her dad only escaped with the clone. Otto found the original Kiana and used his Solium technology to revive her, which is why she has blonde hair now instead of white hair. The head trauma also conveniently wiped her past memory, which is why she didn't know until now. So that makes her and Kiana sisters. Oh yeah, and then there's the final showdown where the two of them kick Otto's butt or something, which is kinda cool, I guess. Between the pseudoscience info dumps and Otto's obnoxious 5D chess with multiversal time travel, that's really all this chapter boils down to. I swear, half of Otto's dialogue just sounds like this.
But Major, now that they know of our plans...
Ah, Herr Doctor, but that is the plan. Now that they know our plan, they will plan around our plan. And so we shall in turn plan around the plan that they are planning around our plan.
Your brilliance knows no bounds.
Oh, and even though you beat the tar out of Otto and prevent him from deleting the past 500 years, he still changes the past so Callan lives in a cutscene anyway. Boo. Joke's on him. Callan winds up in the Sea of Quanta and falls in love with Yae Sakura or something like that. Okay, so this is the part where Hoyo begins rushing to end the main story, so I'm going to do the same. Basically, when the Herrscher of Corruption dies, there's only one thing left: finality, which is basically just the part where Honkai kills you.
Well, this is the part where he kills us.
Hello! This is the part where I kill you.
In order to prevent the destruction of humanity, again, Kevin and the World Serpent enact Project Stigma, which is basically just store-brand instrumentality from Evangelion. Basically, all of humanity starts getting turned into dreams, and each of those dreams form together into one giant super being that'll eventually crystallize into new life forms known as ideas.
Jesse, what the f*** are you talking about?
Okay, so the mechanics of this are somehow both over-explained and under-explained at the same time. Remember when the World Serpent was doing genetic engineering on people in Arc City? That was to try and awaken people's stigmata, which are basically special genes that make you really good at adapting to Honkai energy. Only, I guess stigmata also have their own consciousness sometimes? Which is what Dark Seele is. And then on top of that, sometimes stigmata can have their own pocket dimensions or something? I don't know, the game doesn't really do a good job of explaining this very well in the main story, and I don't exactly feel like rummaging around the wiki to figure this out. If this doesn't sound fair, keep in mind the game had around 70 hours of gameplay before this to get these things sorted out, and they chose not to. Fortunately for our heroes, there are a handful of areas that are somehow immune from being absorbed into Project Stigma, such as the underwater city from ages ago. The B-rank Valkyrie Susanna, who was previously an NPC in the Colossal arc, just so happened to be there and helps our heroes use it as a beachhead to start reversing the effects of Project Stigma. She's a total klutz and isn't very talented, and I love her for it. Teresa discovers that her hidden Honkai Beast genes allow her to eat dreams, because she can just do that now, I guess. Meanwhile, Seele wound up on the moon somehow. Seele, the moon bear. How did I get here? The end. And there's an ancient moth base there that she and the orphan's Raven was taking care of are currently at. Kiana, Bronya, and Raiden May are all shoved into various bubble universes to prevent them from meddling with Project Stigma, but they all eventually figure this out and group up in a bubble universe that is a copy of the Moth Moon base before finality happened at the end of the previous era. This is the first time that the trio has been properly reunited since Raiden left for the World Serpent, and it is a pretty nice character moment. They managed to find Dr. May and Prometheus, an AI that was made to piggyback on Elysia as she returned to Honkai so that she could make the whole Herrschers can break away from Honkai thing possible. This means that up until this point, the god of Honkai that characters have been speaking to was actually Prometheus, because that retcon was totally necessary. The most frustrating thing in this entire story arc has got to be that despite the fact that Raiden May and Dr. May finally get to meet face to face, literally nobody acknowledges the fact that they have the same name or that they look and sound identical. Come on! All we needed was for Bronya to crack some kind of joke about there being two Mays, or Dr. May to comment on how Kiana reminds her of Kevin or something. So after the biggest missed opportunity of the century, Dr. May has Raiden and Kiana press B to gay, and that helps them return to reality. Meanwhile, out of literally nowhere, the writers decide that A, the Hyperion ship AI is now more than just a mascot character that helps you out in the game's menus, and is now instead fully canon instead of only appearing in that one open world side mode that they never finished. Not only that, she's all grown up now and has strange alternate timeline powers that they never explain, and everyone in the fanbase agrees is poorly executed. It's probably for this reason that she almost immediately gets incapacitated until the final showdown at the end of the story. Is it new character time? I think it's new character time. This is Herr, who apparently was a stigma born from Kiana's mom's blood coming into contact with a crapload of Honkai energy when Siren killed her 20 years ago? Why hasn't she shown up in the plot until now? I don't know, but apparently she talked with Bronya's mom once. Then next is the part where Hoyo constructs an elaborate excuse to give Bronya a new Herrscher form, because at this point her character is really old and has been severely power crept. Yeah, I guess it's kinda cool that she exceeds the title of Herrscher of Reason and becomes the Herrscher of Truth, but man is this a total butt pull. Oh right, Kiana's dad is still trapped in one of those Stigma pocket dimensions. Let's have Kiana and Durando quickly rescue him. Dante from the Devil May Cry series, Siegfried Kaslana, briefly becomes the third playable male character in the entire game. It's a shame it's only for a brief bit in the story and then never again. Then Durandal returns to Earth to help out by literally walking home from the moon. I kid you not, that's actually what happens. Then we find out that Honkai is caused by something called the Cocoon of Finality, which is an alien being that can draw energy from a higher dimension and manifest it in the form of Honkai energy. So of course, we gotta fight our way to the Cocoon so we can defeat Finality and save the day. Raiden May uses what she knows about what happened to Elysia to try and figure out the way to the Cocoon, and eventually they get there and both Kiana and May get updated Herrscher forms too. I do agree with a lot of people that Kiana's new form feels kinda unearned, but I actually think that May becoming the Herrscher of Origin ties in nicely with everything she went through with Elysia, so I'll let that slide. Kevin then reveals that humanity wasn't revived in the current era using people from the previous era or any of their cloning tech, but that it just re-evolved from scratch, and that the Cocoon causes a 50,000 year cycle where humanity evolves into being only to be destroyed by Finality every time. Why does it do this? It's for a stupider reason than you think, because it just wants to give humanity a big ol' hug. I'm not kidding, that's actually how they word it. Yeah, the real reason is the Cocoon is trying to find the perfect vessel for Honkai energy, and it just goes a little overboard and wipes out people when they get too close to being able to actually handle it. So you think that if it actually wanted to force the growth of something that can handle Honkai energy, it would just not kill all living things? What, is it stupid? Then Kiana, May, and Bronya take on Kevin, who uses his full Honkai beast form to take half of the power of the Cocoon and be the final boss, because he's gotta make sure Kiana's worthy of Finality or something. It is a pretty cool fight, I'll give Hoyo that. But then they have this weird bit where the Hyperion gives fire support, which on its own would have been fine, except surprise! The player character captain is canon now, and all of these extra torpedoes show up from alternate timelines all at once from all other captains in the game. And like, I get that Hoyo's trying to do a "it's all thanks to players like you" moment, but it really just doesn't work here. With Kevin defeated, the world is finally at peace. and the cocoon recognizes Kiana as the true heir to finality, which essentially makes her the goddess of Honkai on Earth. This has the awkward side effect of making her extremely radioactive, so in order to avoid nuking everyone on Earth, Kiana has to remain on the moon until it can figure out how to harness enough Honkai energy to prevent her from giving everyone on the same continent as her radiation poisoning. Even though the end of Honkai 3's main story arc is very rushed, poorly explained, and once again involves another open world map filled with gimmicks, I would be lying if I said it wasn't cathartic. It really is the perfect microcosm of everything that makes this game stand out. Bombastic action filled with mind-bendingly stupid lore. It does a pretty good job of tying up all the loose ends, except for one really big one. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure this next part was an excuse to give Seele a Herrscher form. But how is it possible now that all the Herrschers have been defeated? I'm glad you asked. We start with Seele riding Project Bunny into Nagazora. She's been tasked by Shixel with a mission to investigate some strange goings-on, the details of which are frankly not all that important. Let's see, Kiana's stuck on the moon, Raiden is off on another assignment, and Bronya is, doing an internship at Welt's video game development studio? What the? Seele meets up with Susanna, who, thanks to her valiant efforts in fighting Project Stigma, has now been given her very own unique battlesuit. She's, still not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Anyways, while investigating for their assignment, all of a sudden the two of them get pulled into the Sea of Quanta out of nowhere. Except now, Dark Seele has a body of her own. Huzzah! When trying to figure out what's going on, they go through a portal that takes them to a very strange bubble universe. Or I should say, Seele and Susanna do. Dark Seele winds up somewhere completely different. Seele and Susanna run into a mysterious drifter who turns out to be Shigure Akira, a former squad mate of Kiana's mom. She's an idol with a gun. This world is called St. Salt Snow City. Where it snows, you guessed it, salt. Also, the sun never sets for some reason. Meanwhile, Dark Seele traverses a world of perpetual night, and it's filled with wisps that claim to be the spirits of the dead. They revere some kind of almighty sage that will supposedly guide them back to reincarnation, who turns out to be none other than the Herrscher of Sentience? Just kidding, she's just tricking the locals into thinking she's the sage. The real sage is in St. Salt Snow City's main crystal tower, and apart from running the city, she also upholds the literal fabric of the bubble universe. Over time, both Seeles eventually re-establish contact with each other, with Senti-chan's telepathy serving as communications between both bubble universes. As it turns out, the Dark Universe is totally the land of the dead for the residents of St. Salt Snow City, which is a bit concerning considering Dark Seele and Senti-chan still consider themselves very much alive, thank you very much. In order to get to the bottom of this, Kira and company recruit the help of a local by the name of Vita. To make a long story short, they find out that the sage has been recruiting the help of none other than Herr and Prometheus. Herr rescued Prometheus from the copy of the Moth Moon base that the main trio was in during Project Stigma, so this Prometheus isn't the one that became the Will of Honkai. Even so, the two of them have been roaming the Sea of Quanta, taking care of rogue stigmata that were set loose by Project Stigma. This is Herr's way of atoning for her role in nearly wiping out humanity. Kira isn't exactly a big fan of Herr because to her she's just an imposter walking around in her old squad mate's skin. Fair enough, I suppose. Anyways, the sage is one of those rogue stigmata that also happened to wind up here and assume the role of a local legend since she randomly gained the same powers as the sage had in the legend. Confused? Good. Anyways, they find out that the light and dark bubble universes are slowly collapsing in on each other, unless the sage performs the duties the legend outlines. This is why Herr drags Seele all the way down to this bubble universe, so the Stigmata stage can pass her powers on to Seele, which then gives both light and dark Seele's sage powers. This seems like it would prevent the bubble universes from collapsing, but then the writers decided nuh-uh, and both universes start collapsing into each other even harder. They then reveal that Vita is actually from Venus, the real one, not a bubble universe Venus, and she's the last survivor of a civilization that existed there before it got curb-stomped by the cocoon of finality. She also has a quantum computer embedded inside her. This promptly malfunctions and catapults everyone into the future briefly. We see Seele, who is clearly trying to hide the fact that she's in low spirits, go about a relatively mundane day, but when she heads home she's visited by Bronya. It's a poignant scene where Bronya expresses concern for Seele's well-being, because she's still struggling emotionally after the death of the other Seele. What really makes this sequence stand out to me, however, is the reveal that in this future, it's the light Seele that dies. leaving Dark Seele desperately trying to fill her shoes. It's obviously a red herring to try and introduce the possibility that Seele could get killed off, and honestly, I kinda wish they had the balls to go through with it. The idea of Dark Seele's worst fear coming true, that is, failing to protect Light Seele, is haunting, and would have led to a really interesting exploration of how Dark Seele is emotionally dependent on Light Seele. But of course, killing off Light Seele would prevent her from becoming a highly profitable Herrscher character people would pull for, and it's quickly revealed that the vision was simply of a possible future rather than a certain one. The rest of the story arc I quite frankly just can't take seriously. It just keeps escalating the problems the characters are dealing with, and when the characters come up with a solution, the writers find another way to say nuh-uh and escalate it further. The bubble universes are collapsing, oh no! Well, if one sage can't prevent the collapse, maybe two can. Except wait, they're collapsing even faster now, because there's a being lurking in the Sea of Quanta that rivals the Cocoon of Finality in power, and it's the one that is causing the universes to collapse. Apparently, this being, only known as Sa, feeds off of destroying bubble universes by adding new laws of physics to them, and causes them to destabilize and collapse. It's also basically all-seeing as well, so the characters have no real means of outwitting Sa either. Oh, and also Vita has been working for Sa this entire time. Hare deduces that parts of the bubble universe are being eaten by Sa, so she purposefully lets herself get eaten because she knows as an idea she can't conventionally die. This turns out to be a completely pointless sacrifice that removes her from the rest of the story arc. I get that they're trying to make the inevitable victory feel smarter or more of an accomplishment this way, but it just doesn't feel that way, because it all boils down to, and then Seele became a Herrscher and whooped Vita's butt. In the end, Vita breaks free from Sa's control and reveals that it was her plan to do so all along. Susanna manages to re-establish contact with Shixel in reality, and they make plans to anchor the two bubble universes to Kiana's power so that it's no longer in danger of collapsing. We're then treated to some fun character moments where Seele finally meets Raiden Mei, and Bronya gets to have a fun vacation in the bubble universe with the two Seeles. Oh, also Project Bunny is a real girl now as a side effect of Seele being made into the Herrscher of Rebirth. Stuff like this is the good kind of fan service. We now check in with Fu Hua, who's been traveling the world on a much-needed vacation when, you guessed it, she falls into the Sea of Quanta. Man, this place used to be difficult to access, but now people are literally winding up here by accident. When she comes to, she finds herself in a strange city called Phosphorus, which is run by little clones of Vita. For some reason, Honkai beasts are attacking here, despite the fact that they really shouldn't be. We're then treated to a wild plot where Fu Hua's old nemesis, Moriarty, yes, as in Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, shows up and starts attacking the city. Yeah, canonically at one point Fu Hua was Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty was a rogue Auto-Apocalypse clone. We hardly have time to put that in our pipe and smoke it when they reveal that the city of Phosphorus was built using the remains of the ark that the Moss launched during the previous era. As it turns out, Phosphorus is a planet way on the edge of the solar system, and Sa hijacked the ark all those years ago in an attempt to remake Venusian society. Sa was the last Venusian, and when finality approached, she survived by just absorbing a ton of energy from the Sea of Quanta all at once, I guess? Vita is a clone of her from before she did this. Anyway, Sa destroys and recreates Phosphorus whenever she feels its people have gone astray, and she does not seem to be happy with the meddling Fu Hua and Moriarty have caused. Just in time, however, Fu Hua manages to find the cryopod containing Griseo, and the two of them set off to fight Sa. There's a pretty cool set piece where Fu Hua finally goes all out in her full Honkai beast form, and then surprise! Hare shows up and Sa gets blasted by a cross-solar system snipe from Kiana. Sa's not dead, but her presence in the solar system has been eradicated for the time being. Oh, also while we're at it, Griseo isn't the only other flame chaser who turns out not to be dead. Su is alive too, although he's ascended to some kind of alternate plane of existence and basically serves as a faster-than-light telephone operator now. While the writing for this part is a little shaky, it's still a step up from the Moon arc and gives some nice closure to the characters. Plus, grown-up Griseo is cute, so I'll give Hoyo a pass. And with that, the story of Honkai Impact 3rd is finally over. Wait, what do you mean there's more? As As if all of that wasn't enough, there's an entire afterstory to Honkai 3rd that was released in the open world side mode in 2020? Yeah, that's right. They spoiled the ending of the game 3 years before they actually wound up finishing the main story. It was so out of left field, in fact, that people were questioning whether or not it was even canon. You play as Adam, one of the first ever male Valkyries. Carol, a girl with a determination to fist. And Raiden Mei, who has long since relinquished the title of Herrscher. You investigate the mysterious invasion of the city of St. Fountain by aliens only known as the Sky People, who have technology so advanced that they somehow have concealed the fact that the entirety of St. Fountain has been converted into a strange, empty shell of its former self, with tons of strange-looking crystals strewn about it. All of the enemies present are artificial life forms made by the Sky People, and they are more akin to trained animals rather than anything sapient. Oh, by the way, it was later revealed that Sa was the one who made the Sky People. A Post-Honkai Odyssey is set in 2 parts, the first being in St. Fountain itself, and the second in the neighboring False Bay. I'd say that the atmosphere and the soundtrack of the first part is better than the second, but the second part has much better gameplay and story. Going back to part 1, the only reason why Shixel seems to have been made aware that something is up with St. Fountain is because Welt and his son Joyce both happened to be in the area at the time, but now are missing. Adam, Carol, and May managed to track them down and rescue them, and then get them out via train.
Welt-sensei will not take the Reason Core and leave us in the middle of an alien invasion that is about to kill us all.
After successfully evacuating Welt and Joyce, your team then pushes onward to investigate the strange floating castle in the sky. They promptly get their butts handed to them at the front door. Adam activates his power that is legally distinct from the Devil Trigger from the hit series Devil May Cry, and barely beats the boss, and then passes out and wakes up in the False Bay. He links up with Shixel reinforcements, who are led by none other than Bronya. Dang, guess she had a last-second growth spurt. The other squad members include Timido Q. Yeah, she tends to be. And Lyle. He, isn't playable and doesn't really add much to the story. Thanks, Hoyo. The second half of the story is mostly scouting out the False Bay and setting up a temporary base of operations using nearby scavenged supplies, as well as testing out the new Moonring system that quite frankly is just a second ultimate button. Ironically enough, the story really only advances once you return back to the first area and investigate the floating castle again, because that's where you find out where the true culprit behind all of this is. It's an AI clone of Otto. Gosh dang it. Okay, so this is Void Archives, a divine key that has decided to copy Otto's personality for some reason. Being a divine key, his ultimate purpose is to fight the Honkai, and he reveals that the Sky People are energy parasites. So what better way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by just sicking the Sky People on all of Earth's Honkai energy? Unfortunately, Void Archive seems to have missed the small detail that this will kill all life on Earth, so we beat him up and then fight the giant mecha that is in charge of the local Sky People forces. It's a pretty neat fight, with a fairly cathartic climax. The only problem is that it totally sets up a Post-Honkai Odyssey Part 3, which I'm fairly certain we're not getting at this point. While the core of Honkai Impact 3rd is a hack-and-slash action game centered around flashy animations and stylish combos, the rest of the game has so much BS layered on it over the years that describing it in a succinct way is nearly impossible. Please bear with me because I'll try my best, but there's probably going to be some stuff that winds up slipping through the cracks. The main reason for this is that the fundamental philosophy behind the game's progression has changed multiple times over the years, and as a new player, you're essentially exposed to all of it all at once. On a most basic level, every character has normal attacks, skills, a temporary buff when you successfully dodge an attack, an ultimate, and a skill that fires off when you swap to that character under certain conditions. However, where things quickly get complicated is how each character actually leverages all of these basic mechanics. The oldest characters in the game are really simplistic. Their normal attacks and dodge skill typically grant SP to charge up their skills and ultimate, and you use SP to use these more powerful abilities. The only confusing part about this is that a character's skill is actually technically linked to their weapon rather than the character themselves, but this usually amounts to changing what elemental type the skill does rather than anything super drastic. However, as time goes on, later characters begin adding additional mechanics specific to them, such as special charge bars separate from the SP bar that allow them to do charged attacks or gain buffs. And the skills begin to be decoupled from weapons, and instead are innate to a character themselves. Except for when it isn't, like how Senti-chan can equip a brick that changes her weapon skill an entire role from support to a main DPS. Don't even get me started on the now abandoned Augment Core system. Stuff like this are essentially leftovers from Hoyo indirectly buffing older characters. This is a pattern that has been repeated throughout pretty much every Hoyo game. They never directly change a character's stats or kit, but instead release new gear or equipment to buff them instead. That having been said, the biggest difference between Honkai 3rd and other major Hoyo titles is that power creep in Honkai 3rd is just absolutely out of control. It doesn't matter if you get the optimal gear for an older Valkyrie, they will always be outperformed by a newer one. Also, unlike other Hoyo games where you can easily get away with using non-signature gear on a character and be perfectly competitive in endgame modes, if you want to keep up in Honkai 3rd, you not only have to get their signature weapon, but their signature gear as well. People often praise how good the stat rerolling system for gear is in Honkai 3rd, but they always leave out a crucial detail that makes Honkai 3rd's system significantly worse than other Hoyo games. That you have to roll the gacha for it. Imagine if Genshin made you pay Primogems for artifacts, or Star Rail made you pay Stellar Jades for relics. This is what the stigma system in Honkai 3rd is like for the vast majority of Valkyries in the game. Any craftable or freely obtained alternatives are a complete joke compared to the ones you get from the gacha, and they're completely unusable on anything but the character they were designed for. Sure, you can get a Valkyrie and her signature weapon and Stigmata from the Battle Pass for significantly cheaper than rolling gacha, but by the time they're available through the Battle Pass, they've been so severely power crept that you're basically only doing it for collection purposes. This is why Honkai 3rd can afford to give out S-rank Valkyries on a regular basis, because they're already heavily outmoded. Pulling for and building out anything that isn't the latest and greatest is, quite simply, a waste of resources. On top of all of this, the amount of daily garbage that you have to do in order to keep up with the game is far greater than any Hoyo game. Let's do a quick run through a typical day in the life of a Honkai 3rd player, shall we? Log in, claim stamina, claim daily coins, claim and resend dorm errands, run material events, check open world tasks, use up memorial arena attempts, do Q manifold or superstring dimension if applicable, send out material expeditions, do universal mirage, claim daily battle pass points and rewards, then do the limited time event dailies. And if it's the end of the week, you gotta run Elysian Realm, which can take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes easily. This may not sound like a lot, but you also gotta keep in mind that all of this is inconsistent. Some days you have to do open world, sometimes you gotta do memorial arena, sometimes you gotta do superstring dimension, and sometimes you don't have to do any of that. And it all literally depends on what day of the week it is, so keeping track of it is all a massive headache. Compare this to Star Rail, where I can literally just log in on my phone, burn all my stamina via auto battle, claim dailies and leave. Some players might argue that Honkai 3rd is better because it has more to do, and it saves players from the infamous resinless behavior that Genshin players do when they've run out of stuff to do in-game. However, this completely misses the point that this is all just busy work. While I am glad that I'm slowly been able to get a large majority of Honkai 3rd's legacy characters in my account's collection, I realize that ultimately it doesn't really mean anything because these characters don't actually raise the capabilities of my account by all that much. While I certainly don't regret the time I've spent experiencing the game's story, characters, and lore, I cannot recommend anyone get into it, even if you are a seasoned gacha gamer. Sure, you might be able to make your way through the game for free, but Honkai Impact 3rd overall just does not respect your time or investment in anything that isn't the latest and greatest new character. Condensing down this behemoth of a game into a video has been a crazy challenge for me, and I'm sure there's still a ton I didn't even get to. That having been said, now that I've seen the entire story through, it's time for me to move on. Holy crap, that's a wrap! Okay, time to... Hang on. What's that?
the story of Honkai Impact 3rd continues. Our new chapter will unfold on a new planet, Mars. See you on Mars!
Oh, you have got to be...